Hi folks, I want to talk to you today a little bit about organisational structure. And when I normally teach this, students will grasp that you can have the tall hierarchical structure, you can have the shorter one that doesn't have that many layers to delegate into, and you can have the matrix structure as well, of course. But what students struggle to understand is what is the impact of that structure on an organisation. And so I'm going to use the example of Apple today and compare them with other people, other large organisations in the industry, because often the assumption is the kind of longer the company's been running for and the larger it is, the more hierarchical it will naturally get. And Apple are trying to defy that to some extent. So if I show you a sample organisational structure, so this is for P&G. So they have lots of different divisions that they work in. So they deal with food, they deal with they sell nappies and stuff like that for babies. They have health products. They have beauty products that they also own, so some of the big beauty brands. And what they've done, you'll notice in the diagram, is they've split the organisation according to the kind of product range. So in each kind of product range, you've got research and development and you've got manufacturing, and they've become their own like mini businesses under the larger umbrella. So by splitting it up, each part has its own responsibilities. They can make decisions more quickly, for instance, and they know their kind of retail space. So, you know, the bit with health, well, they know who their competitors are, so they can make better decisions rather than waiting for, you know, kind of top level managers to make all of those decisions in lots of different industries. They have different profit and loss centers, so they'll all have their separate targets, for instance, and how much of a profit they need to make, etc. And each division will have that. What that naturally causes, however, in organisations is some competition between the divisions. You know, divisions will fight for money for certain things, whether it be research or development, and so that can create quite a competitive environment. Now, that has its pros and cons. Competition can sometimes lead to innovation. It can mean that people are more creative and make better products. But sometimes it can just mean that they're just vying for these resources, and sometimes they're being utilised in areas where you might have a really outspoken kind of leader who kind of is in the favour of the president, let's say, of the organisation, and therefore they get more money. So it's not always fair. So there can be a lot of internal competition. Also, you'll have general managers that look after these different areas. Now, those general managers, for instance, so you might have somebody looking after the beauty area, okay? And they will manage everything to do with beauty, whether it be research and development, manufacturing, marketing, whatever it may be. But they will not be a specialist in all of those areas. You'll very rarely find somebody who's a specialist in manufacturing, marketing, and research and development, for instance. So what's happening is they are making decisions in areas that they are not necessarily specialists in, okay? And we'll come back to that when we look at Apple. So you have general managers. Now I'm going to show you a simplified version of the Apple organizational structure, okay? And it's important to say that that previous one that we've just looked at is what Apple used to have. Now, if we look at the Apple structure, the simplified version that I'm showing you now, what you've got is, rather than having the organization split up by product ranges, you have it split up by specialisms or functions. So we call this a functional structure. So you have all of the specialists that, let's say, look after hardware or software, and even breaking it down even further. So you have all the specialists that look after, let's say, cameras, you know, the cameras that go into the laptops, the phones, etc. And you will have these people, these specialists working together, and they don't work on a whole product, they work on a part of a product, okay? And the only person who really oversees the whole organization and all of the products is the chief executive officer, who in this case is Tim Cook. And what that means is that you have people working together to really specialize in their area and share expertise, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But what it means is that it's a structure that's usually found in smaller organizations, and there's only one profit and loss center. So you're looking at the profit and loss of the entire organization, so to speak. It might be split up into a few different ones, but on the whole, it's one large target that the whole company is trying to achieve. So they're all working towards this one kind of target, which means that you've naturally got a lot more unity. The departments focus on expertise, and this is the really important bit, those with the most expertise are the ones who make the decisions. So you don't have a general manager that's looking after manufacturing, marketing, and research and development, making decisions in all of those areas, because they're not an expert in all of those areas. You have people making decisions about parts of a product because they are experts in that part. And I'll give you an example in a moment. They all have to work together, otherwise you never have a whole product, because you are divided up by function. Okay, whether that be marketing or whatever, you all have to come together to make that product successful. And that's why you have one target, because you're all striving towards the same thing. And like I said, no one but the CEO has that kind of responsibility for all of the areas. Now, what Apple have found is that this structure has made them more innovative. And what's really important is to understand that it's not just that they grew and then they forgot to change their structure. They grew, they had the kind of the traditional structure, which was by kind of almost areas, so product areas. And then when Steve Jobs came back in, he immediately, in one day, is said to have fired all of his general managers. Okay, so he was very determined to get rid of this structure because he didn't believe it was right for the organization. At that time, they weren't being hugely innovative and they weren't very successful. They weren't leaders in the market, certainly in any way, shape or form. Okay, so he got rid of that old structure on purpose and kind of put into place this new one. And the reason for that and some of the advantages of that is really around talent management and people and the impact it has on people that work in that organization. It helps you attract the best possible people for your company, or at least the A players, because people like to be managed by other people that are specialists in that area, okay? You respect people that know that area. One of the reasons you respect your teachers is, you respect them if you know that they've been senior examiners, etc., is because you know that they know what they are talking about. And it's the same with the workplace. And so what ends up happening is you attract this brilliant talent, and it's important to understand that if you're going to be on the cutting edge of innovation and technology, you need phenomenal talent. You need really good talent to come and work for you. And the only way that they'll come and work for you is if they know that they'll be respected, their ideas will be respected, but also that they'll learn from mentors whilst they're there. And so it really helps you attract the most innovative staff, okay? And there's this idea at Apple that experts lead experts. It's not too hierarchical. Everybody can have a say, but if you're going to have a say, you better know what you're talking about, okay? And so it really kind of pushes people to bring their A game and work incredibly hard and do their research and stay on the cutting edge of their industry and take courses and keep training and developing, etc., okay? And that environment, as you can imagine, leads to a lot of innovation. It also forces collaboration. Like I said, you can't produce a whole product by missing out marketing, who are then going to sell it, or missing out finance. And so you have to bring these people together, and they have healthy debate, essentially. So in an article that I was recently reading, they have a lot of debate at Apple because these different ideas come together and these different people come together and they hash out what they want this product to look like and how much they will need it to cost and whether it's realistic, etc., etc. And at every one of their junctures where they face a problem, they kind of deal with it together because they have to put the product together. It also forces you to offer your very best idea. And if you play a sport, for instance, if you play against a harder team, a tougher team, you will end up playing better, or at least learning from them. And that's the environment that it creates. And because your targets are tied to the company-wide targets, you bring your best ideas forward because everybody is doing that, okay? And I'm going to give you an example. And over here, I read about the dual lens camera and portrait mode that in 2009, Apple had the idea to have portrait mode. And what they wanted to achieve was what a lot of kind of portrait artists, a lot of photographers that take portraits do, which is when they are taking a photograph, the focus is very much on the face and the background blurs. So if you use portrait mode in your camera, you'll notice that it does that, and they wanted to try and achieve that. And so they wanted a very sharp picture at the front and blurred at the back. However, they were having real issues with getting the camera to recognize what was and wasn't important. And they did something called the chicken wire test. So I've got two pictures on the side in front of you, and you can see the one on the left-hand side. Because the chicken wire is at the front, it sees it as important and it doesn't recognize the face. And in this case of the animal, okay? And so the animal ends up blurring in the background. But on the image on the right-hand side, you've still got the chicken wire, but it's a bit more blurred and the focus is on the animal. And they had to work with over 40 teams had to come together just for the camera of this phone. Okay, and they studied thousands of portraits and really looked at what the best was. And they had massive debates. And in the end, they decided collectively to delay the shipping of the phone until they could get it absolutely right. And that's really important because remember, their targets are tied to the company-wide targets. And if you don't ship that phone, it means you don't hit your financial targets that year. And as a company, what that does is it gives collective responsibility. You're all responsible for the success of that company. And therefore, you naturally just buy into it. And so that's an example of where the company structure really affects kind of shipping of products and innovation. Now, let's compare that to another organization. If they were just working in their silos, you might have a team that goes, you know what, let's just ship the product. It's not great. We'll get it right in the next iteration or the next update. But because you've got experts working together who are absolutely obsessive about their expertise, and you've got 40 teams of specialists, it's harder to get away with a substandard product. Because you've got people saying, you know what, it is doable, I just need another 6 months, or this is how we do it. And because you've got such bright minds working together, they all want to push the boundaries and have only the best product represent them. And so that's really important. And that's one way in which organizational structure affects a business. Now, you might be asking yourself now, why doesn't every company do this? And there's a couple of reasons. It's harder to manage. Remember, there's the fear that you may never ship anything because you can't get everybody to agree. One of the things that the article that I was reading was saying is that you can only be successful at Apple as a senior leader if you are willing to collaborate. And we work in a world, I think, which is increasingly favored competition rather than collaboration. And so that's a real culture change because people go into these big organizations as senior leaders and they want to shine. And the idea at Apple is that you don't shine as just an individual, you take a team along with you and you are a specialist in that team. And the chances are you are going to be recruiting students from Stanford or Harvard or MIT who are brighter than you, and not being ashamed of that, but learning from them and collaborating and sharing your expertise and collaborating with other people. So it's a very different culture and it's very difficult to get right, okay? Because people do like to shine as an individual. Now, sometimes with this organizational structure as well, you can really struggle to make decisions because people want to get everything perfect. But one of the toughest things really is the recruitment, the mass recruitment of expert staff. And knowledge is increasingly becoming king. And you look at organizations like Tesla, SpaceX, Facebook, and really knowledge is king. And you've got young people that are moving through the ranks who are just exceptional at what they have learned and what they do and the experiences that they have. And they are looking for these mentors that are experts, okay, because they can go out and hire out their skills elsewhere. And so really attracting that pool of people is incredibly difficult. And so the structure stays the same. But I do think organizations will look at this kind of structure more seriously in the future. I hope that gives you a good example of how organizational structure can impact innovation in an organization, beyond just, oh, you know, it's big, so it's a high, you know, it's a tall structure, or it's a relatively small company, so it's a short structure. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond that to culture and innovation and what that structure allows you to do.